Welcome to On the Table, a show about the utter messiness of what it means to be human and alive, lubricated by cocktails, necessity. I'm your host, Serena Smith. Behind the camera is my director and husband, Ian, alongside a small and deeply exceptional crew. And around us are servers and bartenders and patrons going about their day because, as always, we are shooting this live from a fully functional restaurant, Zinqué, in Venice, California. Thank you, Zinqué. So this is the second episode, and in the first episode, I shared that I had held myself back from pursuing this for a really long time out of fear. Fear that I wouldn't be as good as I thought, fear that no one would care, fear that I'd be judged, fear of ceasing to play it safe. And then I did it. And this thing that had been existing inside of me, swirling around in my psyche and my heart, was all of a sudden outside of me and real. There had been these two voices inside me, and I feel like some of you can probably relate to this. One was the cheerleader saying, you know you're good at this and you love it, and it comes from the place of real truth for you, so go for it. Be courageous, choose yourself, go get him, Tiger. And then there was this other voice that was like, you're never going to do this. You are going to remain paralyzed and torture yourself forever. And I really hoped that the cheerleader would win out, obviously, but I honestly didn't know. And as time wore on, there were pieces of me that thought, maybe that other voice is right. And then, by the grace of the universe and my husband and a million spiritual guides, I got the gumption up to do it. And honestly, it felt amazing. And the next morning I woke up and it felt like this weight had been lifted off of me, like this space had opened up inside me where this war had been living. It just felt lighter. I don't mean to be Pollyanna about this. I'm not without suffering, and for other reasons, this has been one of the tougher years of my life, but there is something very powerful about making the decision to stop breaking your own heart. I'm always the first person to cry on my own show. It's like embarrassing. It was an act of deep kindness to myself, and it took a lot of internal work to get there, and that is exactly what my guest today lives and preaches. Houston Kraft is a speaker and author and founder, and he travels the world, excuse me, teaching people what it actually means to be kind and how we can get there, because as he says, it's actually a lot harder and takes a lot more work than we are led to believe. He has spoken live before more than 500,000 people at this point. His organization, Character Strong, has served more than 5,000 schools in 21 countries. It's crazy. And his book, Deep Kindness, A Revolutionary Guide for the Way We Think, Talk, and Act in Kindness, is beautiful. It is serious. It is not fluff. It's essential reading for anybody who cares about showing up for themselves, for their loved ones, for the world. And I would like to think that that's all of us. He also has a follow-up, Be Kind, a 52-week journal for practicing kindness. You should get them both. He's also a friend of mine. He's quick to laugh. He gives my hugs a run for their money, which I do not say to anybody. And he's a marvel on the dance floor. Houston, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, my friend. Very sweet. Cheers to cheerleaders.
Cheers to cheerleaders,
yeah,
dude.
We need them.
Yeah. First ones to die in the horror movie, but we need them internally. By the way, we are going to be doing some viewer questions later in the show, so if you have any burning questions about kindness and how to show up, put them in the chat. Okay, my love. So we are, God, that's a good old fashioned, by the way. I have not had whiskey in many years. Thank you for reintroducing me.
Yeah.
We're shooting this a couple of days after Christmas, shortly after Hanukkah, a season that we're told should be brimming with kindness. But it often brings up a lot of gnarly stuff for people as well. Here I am thinking that I'm so studied and on my path to enlightenment, and I go home and I adore my family. I adore them. And invariably, I'm regressing back to being a prickly 16-year-old version of myself with my mom, who is like maybe the kindest person I know. Why is it that we struggle so much in these moments to give kindness and also receive kindness from sometimes the people that we love the most?
First of all, were you a prickly 16-year-old? Is that...
No, I think I was pretty nice, actually.
Yeah?
But I don't know, you'd have to ask my mom. I'm sure she'll be sharing her thoughts in the chat in a moment. Yeah.
Maybe mine too, honestly. My mom's here right now, and we have such an amazing relationship, and yet just, time together with people that are close to you yields some of the most challenging moments of kindness. And I think part of it is like that the two voices narrative that you have for yourself. Those voices are forged, aren't they? Like by people around us and people we care about. And there's probably a twinge of your mom in the cheerleader, and there's probably a twinge of your mom in the other side too. I think that's like just the nature of a family, and what they pour into you is like that those external voices start to sound like our own voice in our head over time, for better or for worse. And so you like go back to those moments of people in your life who activate both like your like deepest yearning for approval and your like deepest capacity for irritation. So I think that's I think that's why irritability goes up, kindness goes down during the holidays, and it's an exercise. It's just an exercise in like reminding yourself that almost all the annoying things they do are out of desperate attempts to show that they love you, but they're usually clumsy.
Okay, so then how, if we're operating or attempting to operate as our highest selves in those moments of irritation, which it sounds like you are a flawed, imperfect human being also. It sounds like you maybe have those, even you, the kindness guy, has those on occasion. How is one to respond in a moment like that so that it doesn't escalate or result in hurt feelings, right? Because I think what often happens is that even as adults, right, like Ram Dass said, if you think you're enlightened, go and spend a week with your family. Like you're never off the journey, right? And there's always going to be something that's going to sort of cause you to regress. So hearing from my friends all week long about the dysfunctional things that are going on in their families and the fights that are happening, I think the question is like, how do you stop yourself before you lash out or before you're short, right? How do you operate from kindness in those moments of irritation?
We should have filmed this episode prior to the holidays. This is maybe wisdom too late. I wish we had a better answer for you. I think it's like, it's just going back to what, it's the exercise in like naming what you need for yourself. When we talked about it right before we went live, which is boundaries. One of my favorite premises of all time is Brené Brown's research, which is that the most compassionate people are also the most boundaried, which means they say no to a lot of things. And in my family, my mom has a bunch of siblings, and a lot of the siblings really love to be together and love on each other, but it also yields a lot of friction and sometimes frustration. And then there's my Uncle Frankie, who says no all the time, and they get frustrated with him. But when he shows up, he's like fully there, he's fully present, he's fully loving, he's fully kind, because he's like he's not there when he doesn't want to be. And I saw Brené speak many years ago, and she used the metaphor of like, or the analogy of saying yes to making like the brownies for the event. And like, I don't have time to make the brownies, I don't want to make the brownies, and now you're making the brownies like filled with hate.
You're resentful about the brownies.
Those are resentful brownies. You don't want hate brownies. Those are like way less good brownies. And yet most people will like say a lot of yeses during the holidays that they don't actually want or actually mean. So I'm in that exercise right now where I was like, what do I need today from my mom? And do I need to say no, even though I like love her so much and want to show up? But I was like feeling myself getting irritable. So Boundaries. It's always boundaries.
Boundaries, dude. Oh my God. I don't even think I'd
It's your
heard the word.
post-holiday wisdom.
Oh my God.
Have boundaries.
It's good. It's good. I don't even think I'd heard the word boundaries until 3 years ago. I've been trying, but I want you to thread this needle a little bit more because I think that that's a big part of it, right? That like part of what we have historically been taught about kindness or what it means to be kind is essentially to overextend, is to never say no to people, right? And then that has these other ramifications, which is that you're depleted, maybe you want to turn off altogether, you're in a state of overwhelm, you're making resentment brownies. So can you tell us what it is about kindness that it feels like we're getting wrong? And what kindness actually is?
Yeah, that's a bigger question, which I'm happy to.
It's a bigger question.
Go
Take
there
another
first.
sip.
Sure, yeah. Okay, let's stay on mom subject for a second.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, one of my earliest memories was sitting in the bathtub, lots of bubbles. My mom was trying to help me spell the word temperature, just breaking it down. I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Tough one.
Temperature. And I don't know if it's that or probably lots of other reasons, but from like a pretty young age, I really liked words. Like I'd go home to like visit my grandma in the summers and I would like learn how to spell the longest words I could. Very exciting, nerdy stuff as a young kid. But I feel like I've always been attracted to words, and when I started to think about the book, a lot of it had to do with like understanding how clumsy the word kindness is in our world. Because I'd talked about it for a long time, and I'd seen it in a lot of spaces in my work. For many years, I was like speaking in schools, so just about any hallway I ever walked down had like posters that talked about kindness. The advent of social media, you see posts about it, you see t-shirts at Target. Like kindness is increasingly hot right now, partially I think in response to a world that is like desperate, anxious, overwhelmed, divisive, and so we're trying to compensate. But just because we're talking about it more doesn't mean we're any more effective at it.
Right.
In fact, to go back to the idea of words are like this really essential part of how we experience being human, which is the way we talk about things oftentimes shapes the way that we do them or behave with them or think about them on a day-to-day basis. And kindness, I think, is just really clumsy. We get told from a young age that kindness is this like simple, fluffy thing, and it gets reinforced in schools where the posters on the wall say throw kindness around like confetti. In many ways, it's the impetus for the book. I was like very frustrated by this notion that we were advertising to kids that kindness was as simple or as easy or as free as throwing confetti around. And I think if that were the case, the world would be a way more kind place.
Truly.
But it's not. And I think that's why so much of our world fumbles with it, is because it is a word that has been oversimplified. And when we oversimplify something in the way we think about it, then we don't assign the value or practice or discipline to the actual exercise of it. It's like, oh, it's just kindness. It's almost like because we all crave it, and because it seems and it's advertised as a simple thing, random acts of kindness, it's not thought about as like a real disciplined, intentional, boundaried pursuit. So to like go back to thread the needle on the original question, yeah, it requires us to get really clear on what's okay and what's not okay in our life. It requires us to exercise boundaries, because actual practiced deep kindness should be really rich with clarity and care and abundance, and not an overextension of yourself, not a bending over backwards. Does it require sacrifices? Yeah. Will it require your time and energy and effort and maybe a drop in your ego or pride? Yeah, for sure. But it shouldn't be something that you're doing because you're obligated, and it shouldn't be something that you're doing when you don't actually have the time, and when doing it becomes self-sacrificing to the point where it's not honest or rich or real. So I think that's the nuance that we lose in the posters that we see walking down halls.
That's not fitting on a poster.
It's a longer poster for
Yeah.
sure. But it's also like such an essential building block of society that we don't functionally know how to do. And I think it's really important that we do. As we look around, we're like, we're bad at this thing. It's something we all agree is like worthwhile and important, and we suck at it.
Where do you think the PR campaign went wrong? Like, why is it that something that is actually associated with a deep amount of discipline and intentionality, why has it been so associated with fluff for so long?
It's a good question. Who dropped the ball? I don't know. I think it's like anything else that's hard but worthwhile. We try to repackage it in 1,000 ways to make it palatable.
Yeah.
But it's just work.
Okay,
It's
so
uncomfortable, challenging work. And so we're like, what if we put it in an app? What if we made it a random act? What if we did fluffy news stories about it and put rainbows over the top? That might make it easier.
Yeah.
And nothing makes it easier. It's just a practice.
there's a bit of a tension here because it's like on the one hand, you're saying what the world needs and what we all need is more real, authentic, deep kindness. And then on the flip, you're saying, yeah, but like actually kindness is kind of fucking hard, dude. You know, like it takes real work, not even to just get to the point of engaging in the actions, but it takes real internal work to develop the emotional intelligence to be able to step into these situations, which could feel to some people like a bit of a deterrent, you know? Like generally when people hear that things are hard and that they might not be good at them right away, they might say, well, I'll steer clear.
For sure.
So
yeah.
So what are some like low lift ways that people can engage in more kindness in their lives, not just to other people, but also to themselves, that will feel gratifying and also don't need to be like the advanced level course?
Mm-hmm. Sure. 101.
101.
Where do we start? Where do we start?
Yeah, where do we start?
I think, like any other habit or behavior change in your life, a lot of it's about like identity. Do we think of ourselves as a kind person? Do we want to be a kind person? One of my favorite quotes is, "We're not human beings, we're human becomings." So, like a premise of who do we want to become, and do we want to become a kind person? If that's true, then it's worth recognizing that like the becoming process requires just reps, small, consistent reps over time. And
Habit building.
It's just, yeah, it's all habits. We're mostly routine machines. 45% of our day is habit, which means in my brain, like that's a substantial part of who I am. Will Durant, also one of my favorite quotes, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit." I think of that as like kindness is not an act, it's a habit. To become a kind person, I have to repeatedly do it. And I think for a lot of people, the challenge is that kindness is this massive, beautiful, but vague concept. And so we don't know how to answer the question, even what seems like a simple question, what does it look like to be kind today? Mm-hmm. It's actually a massive, complicated, amorphous premise.
Totally.
And so for me, it's the exercise is constraint. Like how do we create constraint that drives specificity? Because one of my core beliefs that I speak to in the book is that specificity drives significance. When we ask generic questions, we get generic answers. When we give generic kindnesses, we get a generic response. One of my favorite compliments from an educator that saw me speak, he was like, "My favorite part of your talk was when you were talking about the importance of specificity, because my least favorite compliment to get from my boss is thanks for all you do."
Yeah.
He's like, "You don't even know what I do. Thanks for all you do" is just like this generic.
It's a throwaway.
Yeah, it's actually worse than a throwaway. It kind of is like offensive that we're not taking the time to honor people on a more specific level. So Kindness 101 in my brain is actually creating a structure for yourself that feels manageable and specific.
Okay.
So I start to ask simple questions that modify the question, how do I be kind today? It could look like this. How do I be kind to my mom today? Back on that subject. How do I be kind to a friend today? How do I be kind to a roommate? How do I be kind to a sibling today? I can modify it more. How do I be kind to my mom in 5 minutes today? How do I be kind to my roommate through an act of service? How do I be kind to someone in 10 minutes or less? Any one of those like different variables create a different constraint on the question that makes it less overwhelming and more specific, and as a result, more meaningful. So you can generate a lot of answers to those different things, and all those, depending on like how much you want to invest in your day-to-day kindness, you might structure that question differently. But the organization I get to serve, which is called Character Strong, every one of our teammates has like a quarterly to be goal. So we talk about like to be kind, to be present, to be grateful. And every day, as a part of like our working structure, people write out a singular task. It's like a to-do list, but we call it our to-be list, that is like designed to put a focus on the things that we know are important, but they typically fall by the wayside when we get busy or overwhelmed or anxious or stressed out. So it's just like A, an exercise in priority, and B, an exercise in specificity.
You just brought up something that I think about a lot and thought about a lot as I was preparing for this show, which is that like I think a lot of us recognize that when we're in a good place and we're happy and we're feeling abundant, it's pretty easy to be kind, right? We're being kinder to ourselves internally as well. And when we're in our suffering, a lot of that can fall by the wayside. It can feel really hard to be kind externally and internally when you're wrapped up in your own worry. How is it that we can step outside ourselves in those moments and still be a force for kindness when shit feels pretty tough?
Yeah.
Which I think is, you know, not to be overly negative about it, but I think it's a lot of what's going on right now, right? We're looking at an anxiety epidemic, we're looking at a loneliness epidemic, there are wars raging, political divisiveness, right? It's very easy to look around and feel overwhelmed by the pain externally, globally, and then there's also a lot of pain going on internally.
Yeah.
So again, like how is it that you can step outside yourself in those moments and operate from kindness when it doesn't feel like the natural thing to do?
Yeah. It's constant tension. I think it's the tension the world feels. I think it's part of the stress the world feels is like we want to do good and yet we're overwhelmed consistently by the realities that the world faces, both on like a macro level and for many of us on an individual level. So how do we overcome ourselves?
Yeah.
One of the quotes that I heard years ago that I put in the book was the London Times like put out this question to the world many decades ago. The premise, they asked philosophers and writers and theologians, what's wrong with the world today? And G.K. Chesterton wrote back, I am. And I've always loved that premise of, in many ways, like radical ownership over how we experience the world and ourselves, and the truth that the world is typically the size of us. Like what we're aware of, what we experience, what we do in the world is about as big as how we perceive it. And on any given day, that answer and that reality can feel or look different for us, and what we need might be different, in the sense of like there might be days truly where to take best care of the world, it is like best to take care of you and get one of the many kinds of rest that we are chronically absent of in our world and our culture. On other days, it is the exercise of saying, if I want to experience joy, I have to be bigger than me, because me right now is just sad and stressed and anxious and lonely, and the exercise of reaching beyond myself is in many ways the only way I'll escape myself. And you know, sometimes you need to rest and restore internally. Sometimes it is truly the exercise of external kindness that brings you joy and connection and hope. And the tension of knowing when I need each of those is mostly an exercise in contemplation, reflection, honoring what you need, understanding what you need, all of which I'm generally terrible at, but something I believe to be important.
Are you?
Yeah.
What,
One of the best critiques of the book is I almost talk zero about self-kindness and that practice in the book. It didn't even occur to me to write about it.
it was something that was going through my mind the entire time that I was reading the book as well, which was like, to engage in this work externally requires a lot of work internally.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to engage in that work of quieting your inner critic and engaging in self-compassion, then how are you expected to get to the phase where you can go and engage in it externally? I think there's something important about what you just said, where sometimes it's about just go and attempt to do it externally, and it's going to have some internal benefit. But I mean, a lot of what you're talking about in this book is like concepts of like deep mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get the sense, as you're working in these schools and with adults as well, that people are engaging in those practices reflexively, or does the work actually really start there?
Yeah.
The inside piece.
Yeah. Yes, and it's to be human is both. It's like behavior drives emotion, and vice versa. So I think it requires both. It's both teaching people the way to think about kindness. It's giving them opportunities, because I think our world is really short on like practical opportunities to invite people into meaningful, low-lift behaviors that like help them understand what kindness can feel like, why it is generative, why it is hope-bringing, right? It is a behavior that, when practiced, has high internal yield. That exercising altruism is a selfish act in that it always generates something on the far side for you.
Yeah.
And you can't just do that and burn yourself out. You can't overextend that way. And there's going to be lots of moments where you don't want to, or something's getting in the way. Like the whole premise of the book is what gets in the way of a behavior that we collectively know is important. And that's the self-work. It's understanding the fears, the insecurities, who your cheerleaders are, who your demons are, who's speaking at what time, and why they're speaking those things. So it's not this or that. It's both. You need both. I don't think you don't have to start with one versus the other. I think both are equally valuable.
It's not binary.
No.
What does that self-work look like for you right now?
I have no idea.
Really?
Panic. That self-work for me right now looks like the discipline of clarity. It's like the mantra of 2023 for me is that clarity demands action. When you get really clear on something you want, or something you care about, or something you're scared of, at least for me, when I get very clear about something, it forces me into action. And so I stay quite often very pleasantly in the ambiguous, like right on the precipice of clarity, but not actually saying, this is what I want, or this is what I need, this is what I care about, these are my boundaries. And I have some of those, right? But I don't have that like crystal clear. And I know for myself that I avoid that exercise, because as soon as I know it, I have to do it. And so self-work for me would be getting still enough to listen to what I actually want, creating clarity enough to drive action, and those actions will likely require tough conversations, boundaries, new realities, loss, sacrifice, all the things that make life really beautiful and uncomfortable. So 2023 for me has been an exercise in momentum, but not full clarity. And another Brene Brownism, I think one of the most potent 3-word pieces of wisdom that's ever been generated is clear as kind. And unclear is unkind. That's how she would frame it. So when you get really clear about who you want to be or how you want to act or how you want to show up, it's kindness towards yourself. Clarity in your boundaries is kindness towards others. Clear is kind. That's my work.
You have developed this entire career, remarkable career, and also sort of persona, right? Whether that was intentional or not, around being the kindness guy, which is a really beautiful thing. But I think it can also cause a few other sort of attendant things to crop up. One is that there can be this association that then maybe you're a perfect human, right? A person who only ever shows up in full kindness. You seem to be saying right now you can't always grant that to yourself. Do you feel like you have the latitude to fuck up?
I have some people that I have the sense understand me well enough to grant me that latitude. Do I have that internal sense of that latitude? Not particularly. I'm working towards it. I recognize it as like a fracture, as like, you know, self-dissonance. When you experience that like sense of, the multiple voices that say, hey, there's things that you want to be, that you want to do. Are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to be this way? And there's been lots of small moments over time where I'll like give myself that latitude. And the comedy is always that every time people are so welcoming and excited and I think feel, there's like deep acceptance and actually like celebration around it. And it's bizarre that I will still resist because the identity created through this work was a lot of reps over many years. So it's slowly pulling those two things apart. And they're not opposites, right? They don't have to be opposites, but both need to, in order for like kindness to exist more richly and more authentically, all the other stuff needs to be equally valid and true and real and expressed and explored for me. And there's a very small like group of people that I give that piece of me to. More of the work is to like figure out who I can share that to, how I can share that more often, to be less of a first impression version of myself.
Right, like, it makes me think of this woman, Amanda Nguyen, who I interviewed some years ago when I was at Masterclass, who had been raped in college, and there were like zero protections for what she went through, and so she sort of made it her life's work. I don't think she realized at the time that she was making it her life's work to go and get the laws changed, right? And she's done this really remarkable thing, but she's so deeply associated with this thing that there was a piece of me that felt, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, I don't know how she feels, but like there was a piece of me that felt a little pained about a sort of lack of dimensionality that was granted to her. She was so associated with and lauded for it, right?
Yeah. Right.
And people adored her for it and were deeply grateful in, I'm sure, the way that they are to you. But I do wonder when you are engaging in those reps over and over and over again, if the sense of the fullness of yourself gets siphoned to a degree. You know, do you feel like your three dimensions, in some circumstances, come down to one?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure different people, their work has the same effect in different ways. But I know Amanda, and it's funny you say that, is like, if I were to be invited, the first things I would share about Amanda would be certainly the work that she's championed.
Yeah.
And that's both a great gift and a great challenge, because it's reductionistic of who Amanda is. And the first time we met, we had an epic conversation that was totally unrelated to her work.
Yeah, she's super fun.
Yeah, she's amazing. And so, I mean, it's a sensation I feel less now in my life, but it seems like an easy thing for people to fall into, is just like who we present ourselves to be, and the work that we do can become synonymous with so much of our personality. And my job was literally to go into a school and like talk about kindness, tell stories to kids about love and empathy and connection. And so my job, I felt in my mind, was to show up and be like, hi everyone, this is so great to meet you. This is so exciting. And I would do that sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a day. And you just get like reps on being the smiley first impression person. And yeah, you reduce your 3 dimensions down to 1, for sure. I'm a little more 3-dimensional now.
I'd say so. I'd say so, but was there a turning point?
Yeah, lots. I mean, my mom got sick in 2016, and there was a turning point in, I spoke at 130 schools that year. I was like on a plane every day, traveling all over the place, and that put a hard shift to my experience. I was also in a relationship at the time, and I was married and ended up getting divorced, and it was in large part because of like travel, identity, and the shadow side of that, or the byproduct of that, which is like lack of emotional depth at the time, right? Like an immature response to that repetition was, I just like didn't know how to be more emotional than happy.
Yeah, and deal with some of the less comfortable stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my job was to turn the less comfortable stuff into more pleasant stuff. And so I would do that in a way that was, non-honoring, dismissive.
So
that's a turning point.
So what is the work that you did to make you get in touch with and get a little bit more comfortable with those uncomfortable feelings? I'm thinking about this interview that I was listening to. I don't know, I can't remember what podcast it was on. Maybe Andrew Huberman, weirdly, but he was talking about some like rock star friend of his and how he would go out and he would play these arenas and he would just be getting like so much positive reinforcement and so much validation, right? And just like, it's crazy what that's doing to your nervous system from an adrenaline perspective, from an ego perspective. And then he said, after each show, he would go and he would like sweep the venue because he needed something that was going to bring him back down to earth and reality, so that when he showed up home to his wife, he wasn't operating from this space of like, well, everybody else loves me, so why not you, right? Because that's not the reality of like a full and rich and messy life. So what was it for you? Or are you still grappling?
Sweeping, I guess. I gotta start sweeping more.
Yeah.
That's probably
You've been doing yard work.
Yeah. Honestly. I mean, my like vehicle of messy self-expression is dance, for sure.
You and me both, babe.
Yeah, I know. We got that in common. It's it's moving meditation. It's emotional expression. It's I try to move in ways that are unconventional. I like to it's one of the few ways so much my career is verbal and it's curated and it's supposed to sound really good and nice, and dance is like a messier free-form format that allows that to be less put together. So that's a piece of it. And then more recently just being on land and in nature, building stuff that is doesn't have to be perfect, which is work in progress for me.
You've mentioned a couple of times that you're a words guy. I'm very much a language person as well, and I'm a huge proponent for compliments. I think it's really important to know how to give a good compliment, and I think it's also really important to know how to receive a good compliment. I feel like I've actually taught more people in my life how to take a compliment.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little bit divisive. Like, I think there's a subset of people who think like, yeah, compliments are wonderful and amazing, and there's a subset of people who think like, you shouldn't have to say that stuff, and does it lose its meaning if you're throwing them around? So I'd love to know what your stance is on compliments as they pertain to kindness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll give you a follow-up after that.
Okay. So, well, specificity is, I think, underscores the whole thing. That the more specific the compliment, the more meaningful it is to the person, because it shows you're paying attention. And that's all we want in this life, is for someone to pay attention to us and notice something meaningful about how we show up in the world. Yeah.
Right?
It's to be seen and noticed and heard and validated that what we're doing is worthwhile in some way. So I think that it's a worthwhile exercise. I regularly, my work is primarily with educators, so I all the time will put educators into situations where I ask them to send a pretty specific note to someone in their life. And I would say the two most common responses to when I create space and time and a structure for people to send a compliment to someone in their life. Most common response number one is, "Are you okay?" Which is an indictment of our society at large, that we don't ever say kind things to each other. Like, "Are you okay?" Are you going through something hard? Are you drunk? That's the sort of notion that kindness is so uncommon that when people offer it.
That when somebody gives the compliment, the response to the compliment is, "Are you okay?"
Yeah, the most common response is, "Are you okay?"
Oh no.
Or "Where are you? What's going on?" It's that uncommon in our culture.
Wow.
The second most common response is, "You have no idea how much I needed this." Which both of those are an indication to me that most of the good stuff that we experience in life goes unsaid. Mm-hmm. And so it requires a discipline for us to mobilize something which, what gets in the way of a compliment is that it's a vulnerable action. It's naming something that is sweet or soft or gentle, or that it's noting that I'm paying attention to you in a way that can sometimes be like, "Oh, is this uncomfortable for someone to hear?" Or sometimes we've given compliments and they get rejected because people don't know how to receive them. Mm-hmm. And there's all these little touch points in our culture that that tell us that compliments are actually high risk. And so we kind of avoid them, or we water them down. But to really name to someone what you see in them is one of the greatest gifts, both to give and to receive. So I think they're, what was the question? Are they important? Yeah, they're really, we should do them more often.
Yeah, that a specific, thoughtful compliment to you is not an act of confetti kindness.
No.
That's an act of deep kindness.
Absolutely. Yeah, an act of confetti kindness is "Thanks for all you do." It's a generic, watered down little Hallmark greeting card. No, I mean, you've gotten birthday cards from, it's so funny, the exercise of the greeting card industry is there's a thoughtfulness in picking out something, and sometimes someone will send you a card, and sometimes the card, even if nothing's written in it, can be deep kindness, because they're this person
They really thought about me, they saw me in this. Yeah, they know me.
Sometimes you get a card and you're like, "I love this aunt, but they have no idea who I am. This is nothing connected to me."
Totally.
And then sometimes you get a card from a friend that's it doesn't even have to be two sides, but sometimes it's front and back, and they're articulating things that you have no idea that they remembered, or you've never known that they've noticed in you.
Yeah.
Or you did something for them that they are holding on to, because it's this deeply connective thing that makes you feel so seen and appreciated and celebrated. That's the good stuff. Those are the people that get us in our life, and
totally.
And they can get us without saying it, but saying it makes it more alive and more able to be received.
Yeah, I'm feeling very vindicated right now, because it's a big thing for me, but there's also some work that I need to do, clearly, because as a person who engages in giving highly specific compliments to people, I can actually sometimes be really hurt when I get an incredibly non-specific compliment from somebody. Sometimes I think, I don't know, you were better off not saying anything, because there's this aspect of feeling unseen in it can sometimes feel worse than not having heard anything at all. Not trying to deter any of my friends from giving me compliments, please continue. But I think that there's something else broader that connects to about kindness, which is that I think there are times when we want to engage in acts of kindness, but we don't feel like we have the tool set, or that we're equipped to know how to show up in that way. I also thought for a period of time that I might lose somebody incredibly close to me, and I remember during that time being really astounded by the ways in which some people showed up, being sort of heartbroken by the ways in which other people didn't, and then sometimes people showed up in ways where it was clear that they were trying, but it was still kind of hurtful. And I think for any of us out there who's trying to walk through the world with more kindness, there's always this question of, is it better to just show up, period, however imperfectly? Or if you don't feel like you're equipped, is it potentially better to hang back?
That's probably a general question of how you relate to the world. Is it okay to be a beginner in anything, you know? And in spite of us craving kindness and it being a known quantity that it's worthwhile in the world, most of us are really technically, competently beginners at the thing. And so we got to fumble before we are flourishing at it. Years ago, I spoke at a school here near Los Angeles, and I read about it in the book. The chapter is like the vocabulary of kindness, more than pretty good. This kid saw me speak at an assembly, and literally like waited for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes with this group of people until it was basically just him and I alone in the gym. And after all this waiting, he walks up and he goes, "Hey man, I just want to let you know that I thought your talk was pretty good." And then he left. And I had a moment of like, you just waited
for that?
Tell me. But that's like the kindest thing he knew how to say. And now, is that always the case with our friends that give us a sloppy compliment or a generic? No, you gotta read the room, you know, you gotta know your people, and are they being earnest? Are they being authentic in what they're trying to say? And is there subtext that you can extract out of there even if it's not very clear or clean? Maybe. But I think all of us need permission to flop around a little bit in it, because the evidence is in the responses. Are you okay? And you have no idea how much I needed this. Both tell me that this is not a practice that's exercised very frequently. So we got to have a couple of sloppy ones before we get it good.
I wonder if it's just as simple as saying, if you're trying to show up for somebody in a moment and you don't really know how, I wonder if it's as simple as saying, like, I don't really know how to do this.
Sure.
But I'm here and I'm going to try. You know? I think there's something about that humility component, where then as the receiver, you also go like, okay, great, thank you. Wow. Like, you're really stepping outside yourself in an act of vulnerability right now, you know? And I'm going to receive that.
Yeah, it's actually a story that was originally in the book and didn't make it, about my grandpa who was sick. And I had a situation where I knew it was the last time I was going to see him, which is a bizarre sensation. I don't know if you've ever been inside of a moment like that, where you're like, I know this is the last time that I'll get a chance to say something to you. And there's a pressure to that moment that if you're a perfectionist, like I think both of us are a little bit, it's freighted with like a sense of obligation to say something really profound or meaningful. And I had this moment with my grandpa and I panicked. I had such a desire to say something perfect that I ended up kind of just talking about nothing at all. We talked about motorcycles, which I don't like, I have no interest in, and he doesn't really have interest in. And I gave him a hug.
He's not a motorcycle guy either.
No. We just had like a weird conversation about motorcycles.
The mind does weird things.
And I walked away being like, I'll write him a letter. I'll send him a video. And I got like so in my head about how perfect that thing needed to be. And no joke, I finally filmed this video. I took a hike, and at the top of this mountain, I filmed a video, and I tried to send it to him, but I didn't have good enough service. And I got down to the bottom of the mountain, and by the time the message sent, my grandpa had gone into a coma and didn't get a chance to receive it.
Oh my God.
And it's that notion of like, for a lot of us, whatever your thing is, if it's perfectionism or insecurity, whatever the voice, the cheerleader or not, those are like the not spoken of enough barriers to kindness. That there's like so many of these weird fears that play into our ability to relate to people we care about in the world. And I like love my grandpa. I wanted to say something to him, but I was so worried that it had to be the right thing that I didn't say it in time for him to actually receive it.
And then you're in a space of regret over not having done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the takeaway is just go for it, imperfect as it may be.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And trust that it's going to be better than not having tried.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. For sure.
Here for you. Okay, we have a couple of audience questions. Ooh, this is a good one. How can you best display kindness to someone you genuinely dislike without feeling like a jerk or coming off as sarcastic?
Yeah, good stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Couple of thoughts. We can loop back to the boundary conversation, which is it's okay to not exercise fluffy external kindness with everyone. Sometimes kindness is the boundary, and it doesn't have to be sweet and pleasant. It can be very clear and direct. There's also a whole chapter on forgiveness, which is the character trait most closely associated with happiness in people, because forgiveness is this exercise of separating the person from the behavior and saying, hey, your behavior is not okay. I don't need to respond with kindness to your behavior. It's unacceptable. It's hurtful. I don't deserve it. I don't need it in my life. But the person, if we have a core belief that people are deserving of love, kindness, or compassion, then the really big exercise in deep kindness is to separate that person from the behavior, separate that person from the personality, and just say I love you as a human being in this world, and yet I can love you from afar. I don't need to engage with you or interact with you. I don't need to pretend like I like you. That's not kindness. Mm-hmm. Kindness is the forgiveness that says that people fundamentally are A, human and deserving of love, and B, also sloppy, clumsy, and not always people that we're gonna get along with. So can I love them? Can I practice kindness in spite of their behavior towards them as a human instead of them as a friend?
I think for me, and I am by no means anywhere near a master at this, but a practice that I try to engage in when I'm confronted with somebody who I dislike or who rankles me in some way is I'm exposing the extent of my woo-ness here, but I try to think about us all as truly being one. And if I can think of this person as actually being the same as me, if I can get there, then it helps break down some of those boundaries. And if I can't get there, then at least I can say to myself, no matter how vehemently I disagree with their behavior or their opinions or their attitudes, every person fundamentally wants the same things. They want love, they want to be loved, they want to be seen and understood. I try and fail mostly, but try to operate from that place, because then I think it makes the distance between you and that other person a little bit smaller, right? Does that make sense?
Totally, yeah. What an exercise.
Yeah.
That's MLK's for an inextricable web of destiny. Injustice to me or injustice to one person is an injustice to another.
Totally.
That's yeah. Can you be that enlightened with your family? Can you be that enlightened in any given moment? No, not all the time.
Yeah.
But it's a good core belief to come back to when you're feeling particularly activated or frustrated, to say, is there a way to show up in kindness in this moment without folding my own boundaries?
Oof. It's work.
Sure.
Okay.
What else are we doing?
What else are we doing? Drinking old fashions. What's your best suggestion on how to guide young ones toward a lifelong commitment to kindness? I mean, this is kind of the entirety of your work, but.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you elevator pitch it?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think it's fighting the good fight of what you ask most people what they want, and the answer is going to be happy. And culture will tell young people, will sell young people a lot of ways to be happy, most of which are fleeting and frustrating and thing-based or comparison-based. And that's how
Externally driven.
Yeah, it's how most of our culture, especially in a capitalistic world, operates. It's like, you buy this thing, you'll be happy. You get more likes, you'll be happy. You get this kind of attention, you'll be happy.
Or like, you have this achievement, you'll be happy.
Yeah, you get this grade, you'll be happy. You go to this college, you have this much money. All those things that our world has like convinced us of. But there is something that all of us know to be true because we've experienced it in fleeting or hopefully longer stretches of time, where you're sitting with someone over a meal and you're experiencing connection. You have a moment where someone gives you a compliment that like makes you feel like really deeply seen or accepted or heard or valued or validated. You risk making a show because of a nudge and because of a self-confidence, and like you show up and you do the thing. There's a deeper sense of like purpose that exists in the world, and there's more profound moments of happiness than what you get on Black Friday or what you exchange on social media. And that's the long play. Can you teach and can you unteach for a lot of young people what happiness is? And can you have them understand that like the depth of joy is directly correlated to the depth of kindness that you can experience between yourself and other people?
It's beautiful.
That's the pitch.
And the younger that you start it, the less unlearning that needs to occur, right? Then it can actually just hopefully be a learning, versus for the rest of us where we're sort of having to undo some of this conditioning before we can even put new information in.
Yeah. I think we know it to start. You know, in Arabic, the word human means to forget, which means I think we kind of like, right out the gates, we like get it. We know it. We have most of it figured out. And then culture just makes us forget over and over again. Because it's like, no, what if you tried this? And you're like, okay, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, something feels a little like it comes up short.
And then I think part of the journey for all of us is this process of, you don't remember once, you have to remember over and over and over and over again. And for me, every time I get into that space of remembering, I go, oh my God, I'll never forget it. This is what it is. This is what it is to feel connected, to understand why we're here, and I go, I'll never forget it ever again. And then it goes away, oftentimes like the very next day, right?
You gotta redo it. That's why it's remember, not just member.
That's exactly right. Okay, we play a little game on this show. Signature segment for our full 2 episodes thus far, called Am I Doing It Right? Because these are the questions that we're all asking ourselves. One, what is one thing that you're actively working on right now?
Peace, stillness.
How's it going?
Bad, so bad. Distracted and restless. That's how it's going. I want peace and stillness, but I'm distracted and restless.
You have a meditation practice?
Working on it.
Naturally. Trying to get there, but I keep getting distracted.
Harder than it looks. All these posters that say, just meditate.
Like kindness.
Yeah, I know. They have a lot of overlap, unfortunately.
Yeah. What is one thing that you are bad at and you fully made peace with? Like, you're just like, I'll just be bad at this forever, it's fine.
Basketball.
Basketball?
Yeah.
Do you play anyway?
No. No, I have a better answer to that. What am I bad at and I've accepted? Actually, I don't have an answer to that. I don't want to be bad at anything. I've like self-deluded myself into like, oh, I can't like make music or make art, but I don't accept that as like a reality. Basketball, maybe I have. I've given up on basketball.
I'm feeling very seen by your own internal perfectionism.
Yeah.
What's one thing outside of your work and the obvious stuff that you like absolutely kill it at? You're just like, I'm fucking great at this thing.
It's so much like, I don't know, so much of me isn't related to my work. The frequent compliment that I get that I both causes me panic but also pleasure is That's a great question. I think I ask great questions. Yeah, but then I think to myself, I ask great questions, so I have like a lot of pressure on every
I got to
question
continue to
ask.
ask
Yeah.
really great questions.
So I'm just a nightmare at a party.
Wow, we have more overlap than I think I even realized prior. Okay, last one. What is the best compliment that you've received? Not to be hierarchical or anything.
Yeah, what's at the top?
One of the tops.
I think I've had a lot of like really cool compliments in my life. You know, working with kids, they come up with like very bizarre ways to compliment you.
Yeah.
I had this girl who had synesthesia at a school once who said that when I talked, she saw blue, like the sky, and it was like peaceful to her. It's like, that's the nicest, most profound thing anyone's ever said to me. But I think, like,
God, that's beautiful.
yeah, I know. We gotta find her. I think the things that make me feel most appreciated are like the things that I know that I struggle with. So, like when someone tells me that they feel really like I'm present or I'm grounding for them in a moment where they're feeling ungrounded, as someone that can sometimes feel unpresent or restless, those are good wins. So I've had some of those recently where it's like I'm exercising this thing and someone is noting distinctly that this is helping them, or yeah.
Well, allow me to reflect for you that in the years that we've known each other, you have never been anything other than a deeply grounding presence to be around. Truly. I mean that.
Working on it.
Thank you. I love you. It's so nice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to my guest, Houston Kraft. Please go buy his books, Be Kind and Deep Kindness. Buy them, read them for yourself, get them for everyone you know. They're really remarkable. Thank you to my crew for being willing to support this dream of mine. That is an act of deep kindness as well. Thank you to Zinqué. This place is like my Cheers, as evidenced by the fact that they've let us shoot this here twice. Come here and live in the very Parisian magic of it all. And of course, thank you guys to you for watching. It means the world to me. And Mom, I love you. I'm sorry. Oh, one more thing. Oh my gosh, this is so like me that I would forget to thank my husband's company. Thank you to Eclipse.video for sponsoring this show. It's a really remarkable product that basically has you going through the edit process while you're in production. So our team back here has been cutting clips as we have been shooting, which is really remarkable and groundbreaking. And we're looking forward to it taking over the world with kindness. Okay. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.